The twin suns of Varelles hung low in the lavender sky, casting long, trembling shadows across the crystalline spires of the celestial palace. Inside the hall of echoing vows, where the air shimmered with ancient enchantments and the scent of moon blossoms clung to every breath, Joran stood rigid in his battle-worn armor, dented, scorched, but still bearing the insignia of the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Corps. His knuckles were white around the hilt of his plasma saber, not because he feared combat, but because his heart hammered like a war drum against his ribs. Before him, atop the dais of living pulstone, stood Princess Lysara of the Silthari Dominion. Her skin was pale as polished alabaster, her hair a cascade of silver white that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Her eyes, deep, liquid pools of amethyst, held galaxies of sorrow Joran couldn't begin to fathom. She wore a gown woven from starlight threads and memory silk, shimmering with hues that shifted like distant nebulae, and at her throat rested the crown of unbroken lineage, a circlet of frozen time itself. "Sorry, human," she said, her voice soft as falling stardust yet sharp enough to cleave his soul in two. "We can't marry each other." Joran's knees buckled before his mind could catch up. He dropped to the polished floor with a clatter that echoed through the silent hall like a death knell. Around them, the courtiers, tall, elegant Silthari nobles with skin tones ranging from pearl white to deep violet, their eyes gleaming with curiosity or disdain, barely stirred. Protocol demanded stillness, but their silence was louder than any jeer. Joran had fought San Waramis in the Crimson Dunes, piloted dropships through ion storms, and once held off an entire battalion of rogue synthoids with nothing but a broken rifle and sheer stubbornness. But this quiet, devastating sentence from the woman he loved more than oxygen undid him completely. Lysara stepped down from the dais, her bare feet making no sound on the pulstone. She knelt before him, close enough that he could see the faint tremor in her lower lip, the way her long silver lashes blinked too quickly. "Joran," she whispered, using his name like a prayer. "You know the law. The accord of blood and breath forbids union between Silthari and offworlders. Not out of hatred, but because our biology, our souls, they are woven from different threads of the cosmos. To bind them is to unravel both." He wanted to argue. He wanted to shout that love didn't care about cosmic thread counts. But the truth was, he'd known this day might come. Ever since they'd met 3 cycles ago during the siege of the Glass Wastes, when he dragged her wounded form from the wreckage of her skiff while plasma fire rained down. He'd known their bond defied the universe's rules. Still, hope is a stubborn weed. It grows in the cracks of reason, fed by stolen glances and midnight walks through the palace gardens where bioluminescent vines curled around their fingers like silent blessings. "You once told me," Joran said, his voice rough as desert rock, "that the stars don't ask permission to shine together." A ghost of a smile touched Lysara's lips. "And you once told me Terran coffee tastes like scorched regret and bad decisions." He almost laughed. Almost. But the weight in his chest was too heavy. "So this is it? After everything? After I learned your language, your songs, the way your people mourn by singing to the moons? After I gave up my homeworld tour just to stay here? You're telling me it was all for nothing?" "It was never nothing," she said fiercely, her amethyst eyes blazing. "Every moment with you has been luminous. But luminous things can still burn." Before Joran could respond, a low, resonant gong sounded from the eastern archway. The heavy doors of the Hall of Echoing Vows groaned open, and in strode High Regent Vorlin, a towering Silthari with skin the color of storm clouds and eyes like chips of obsidian. His silver armor clinked with every step, each plate etched with runes of judgment. Behind him marched a dozen royal guards, their pulse lances humming with lethal energy. "Princess Lysara," Vorlin intoned, his voice like grinding tectonic plates, "you have dallied long enough with this Terran anomaly." The council grows impatient. The betrothal ceremony with Prince Kalen of the Azure Dominion begins at moonrise. Joran's head snapped up. "Betrothal? You're marrying someone else?" Lysara's face went even paler, if that were possible. "It's political," she murmured. "The Azure Dominion holds the only stable wormhole to the outer systems. Without their alliance, our borders collapse. Millions die. So you'll trade your heart for a treaty?" Joran's voice cracked. "I'll trade my heart to save my people," she corrected gently. "Would you do less for yours?" He had no answer, because he wouldn't. In his boots, he'd do the same. That was the cruelest part. Understanding her choice didn't make it hurt less. Vorlin's lip curled in disdain. "Enough sentiment. Remove the human. He has no place in this sanctum." Two guards stepped forward, their gloved hands reaching for Joran's arms. But Joran wasn't some docile diplomat. He surged to his feet, twisting away from their grasp with the fluid grace of a soldier who'd spent years dodging death. His plasma saber hissed to life, a blade of cobalt fire that cast jagged shadows across the hall. "Touch me," he growled, "and you'll find out why they call Terrans the Unbreakable." Gasps rippled through the court. Vorlin's eyes narrowed. "You dare draw steel in the Hall of Echoing Vows? That is sacrilege punishable by neural dissolution." "Then dissolve me," Joran shot back, stepping protectively in front of Lasara. "But you won't drag her to a marriage she doesn't want." Lasara placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Joran, please, don't make this worse." But it was already worse, because at that moment, the palace alarms began to wail. A deep, pulsing shriek that vibrated in the bones. Red emergency glyphs flared to life on the walls, swirling like blood in water. "Intruders!" shouted a guard from the balcony above. "Rogue synthoids, breaching the western gate. They've taken the armory." Chaos erupted. Courtiers screamed and scattered like startled birds. Vorlin barked orders, his face hardening into a mask of command. The royal guards abandoned Joran, pivoting toward the threat with disciplined urgency. Joran turned to Lasara. "Synthoids? Here? That's impossible. The perimeter shields were sabotaged," she finished, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "This isn't random. Someone wanted the palace vulnerable." During the betrothal announcement, understanding crashed over Joran like a tidal wave. "Vorlin's behind it. He staged this to force your hand, to make the Azure Alliance seem essential." Lasara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Outside, the sky darkened as explosions bloomed over the city like malevolent flowers. The ground trembled. Somewhere, a tower collapsed with a sound like a dying god's sigh. "We have to stop them," Joran said, already moving toward the armory corridor. Before they reached the throne room, Lasara hesitated only a heartbeat before following. She shed her ceremonial gown in one fluid motion, revealing a sleek combat suit beneath, black as void, threaded with silver circuitry that pulsed with her heartbeat. From a hidden compartment in the wall, she retrieved her weapon. The Whisperfong, a curved blade forged from solidified sound waves that hummed with lethal harmony. "You're still coming with me?" Joran asked, half amazed. She gave him a look that held galaxies of defiance. "You think a little thing like, 'We can't marry' stops me from fighting beside you?" He grinned despite everything. "Good, because I could use someone who knows how to aim." They sprinted through the palace corridors, dodging falling debris and panicked servants. The synthoids, sleek, faceless machines with chrome limbs and glowing red photoreceptors, were already swarming the lower levels. Their movements were unervingly precise, their weapons spitting bolts of corrosive energy that melted stone on contact. Joran fired his pulse pistol, taking down two synthoids with headshots that sparked like dying stars. Lasara danced between them, her Whisperfong slicing through metal limbs with eerie silence. Each strike sent out ripples of sonic distortion that staggered nearby machines. "You fight like a poet," Joran panted as they ducked behind a shattered fountain. "And you fight like a man who's never lost a bar brawl," she shot back, reloading her wrist-mounted plasma caster. "Which, given your record at the Dust and Drift Tavern, is impressive." He laughed, a raw, startled sound that felt alien in the midst of battle. "You heard about that?" "I hear everything," she said, peering around the corner, "including how you told the bartender I was the most beautiful disaster you'd ever met." His face burned. That was accurate," she finished, then vaulted over the fountain with a battle cry that echoed like a war hymn. They fought their way to the central armory, where the synthoids were attempting to overload the palace's core reactor. If they succeeded, the blast would level half the capital. Inside the chamber, Vorlin stood before the reactor console, his hands flying over the controls. But he wasn't sabotaging it, he was trying to stabilize it. "What the?" Joran skidded to a halt. Lasara's eyes narrowed. "He's not with them." Vorlin whirled, his face streaked with soot. "Princess, human, get out. The synthoids have overridden the failsafes. The core will breach in 3 minutes." "Then why are you here?" Joran demanded. "Because I may despise your kind," Vorlin snarled, "but I won't let assassins destroy my home." A synthoid burst through the ceiling, landing between them with a metallic screech. Joran and Lysara opened fire while Vorlon resumed his frantic work at the console. "Lysara?" Joran yelled over the din. "Can you reroute the coolant lines?" "I can try, but I'll need to get to the secondary junction." "I'll cover you." She nodded. Darting toward a service hatch as Joran laid down suppressing fire. Vorlon cursed as another synthoid smashed the main console. "It's no use. The manual override is in the reactor chamber itself." Lysara froze at the hatch. "That's a death sentence. Radiation levels are survivable for 3 minutes." Vorlon interrupted grimly. "For a Silthari, not for a Terran." Joran didn't hesitate. "I'm going." "What?" Lysara spun around. "No. You'll die." "Maybe," he said, already stripping off his outer armor to reduce weight. "But if I don't, we all die. And I'd rather go out saving you than watching you marry some Azure Prince." Her eyes filled with tears that shimmered like liquid starlight. "Joran," he touched her cheek. "Just once. Tell me I'm the most beautiful disaster you've ever met." She choked out a laugh. "You're impossible. And you love me for it." Before she could argue, he sprinted toward the reactor chamber, plasma saber blazing. The heat hit him like a physical wall. Warning klaxons blared. His skin prickled with the first bite of radiation. Inside, the core pulsed like a dying heart, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface, leaking streams of molten energy. The manual override lever was on the far side, past a field of unstable plasma conduits. Joran moved like a ghost, weaving through the chaos. His vision blurred, his lungs burned, but he reached the lever. With a roar that tore from the depths of his soul, he pulled it down. The core stabilized with a deep, shuddering groan. The alarm ceased. The light softened from angry red to calm blue. Joran collapsed to his knees, coughing blood. His body felt like it was dissolving from the inside out. Then cool hands were on him. Lysara. She'd followed him in, defying every law of survival. "You idiot!" she sobbed, cradling his head. "You magnificent, reckless idiot." Vorlon appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "The synthoids are retreating. Reinforcements have arrived." Joran tried to smile. "Told you, Terrans are unbreakable." "You're barely holding together," Lysara whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Don't you dare leave me." "I'm not going anywhere," he rasped. "Not until you admit you'd rather marry me than some fancy prince." She laughed through her tears. "There's no one in this galaxy I'd rather marry, Joran Vale. Not even if the stars themselves forbade it." Outside, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The celestial palace stood scarred but unbroken. And in the heart of the reactor chamber, a human warrior and an alien princess clung to each other, not as enemies of fate, but as rebels against it. Because sometimes the most forbidden things are the ones worth fighting for. And this fight, it was only beginning. In the days that followed the reactor sabotage, the celestial palace became a fortress wrapped in whispers. Joran survived, barely, thanks to a rare Silthari healing serum derived from the petals of the eclipse bloom, a flower that only bloomed once every 7 cycles beneath the twin moons. Lysara had emptied the royal vaults to secure the last vial, ignoring Vorlon's protests that it was meant for the sovereign alone. "If he dies," she'd said, her voice trembling with quiet fury, "then the sovereign will have no heir worth ruling." That statement sent shockwaves through the court. It was the first time she'd openly suggested she might refuse the Azure betrothal, not just for love, but as an act of political defiance. Joran's recovery was slow. His skin peeled in patches, his hair thinned, and his dreams were haunted by static voices, the residual echo of the synthoid hive mind that had briefly brushed against his consciousness during the reactor breach. But every morning, without fail, Lysara came to his chamber. She brought him Terran rations she'd secretly stockpiled, packets of rehydrated stew and bitter coffee that tasted, as he once said, like regret with a hint of nostalgia. She read to him from ancient Silthari epics, her voice weaving tales of star-crossed lovers who defied cosmic law and rewrote destiny with their blood. And sometimes, when the palace was quiet and the moons cast silver ribbons across the floor, she simply sat beside him, their fingers entwined, saying nothing at all. Their bond deepened not in grand declarations, but in quiet acts of rebellion. Joran taught her how to throw a knife with lethal precision. "Not that you need it," he joked, "but just in case your future husband turns out to be a pompous windbag." She taught him the Silthari art of resonance breathing, which calmed his radiation tremors and helped him sleep without nightmares. They stole moments in the abandoned East Gardens, where the bioluminescent vines curled around them like living curtains, shielding them from prying eyes. Once, during a sandstorm that howled like a grieving spirit, they kissed beneath a crumbling archway, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. But peace in the palace was an illusion. Prince Kalen of the Azure Dominion arrived earlier than expected, his royal skiff descending like a blade of polished sapphire against the lavender sky. He was everything Joran feared: tall, regal, with skin the color of deep ocean and hair like spun moonlight. Worse, he was kind. He brought gifts: crystal song orbs that played lullabies from his homeworld, rare medicinal mosses for Joran's recovery, and a diplomatic proposal that included shared defense pacts and open trade routes. When he met Lysara in the Hall of Mirrors, he bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "I come not to claim you," he said, "but to ask if your heart might one day make room for mine." Lysara, ever graceful, thanked him. But her eyes flickered toward the eastern wing, where Joran was watching from a shadowed balcony, his heart pounding like a war drum. The real twist came not from politics, but from prophecy. Deep in the palace archives, hidden behind a wall of frozen memory crystals, lay the oracle of the first breath. A sentient archive said to hold the unaltered truth of Silthari origins. Only the royal bloodline could awaken it. One night, driven by a dream she couldn't explain, a vision of Joran dissolving into stardust while she stood helpless, Lysara entered the chamber alone. The oracle spoke not in words, but in visions. It showed her the true reason the accord of blood and breath forbade human Silthari unions. Not because their souls were incompatible, but because they were too compatible. Millennia ago, the first Silthari mated with offworlders, beings from a now-lost star system. Their children were born with unstable genetic harmonics, their bodies unable to contain the dual resonance of two cosmic lineages. Many died young. Others went mad, their minds torn between worlds. The accord was created not out of prejudice, but grief. But then the oracle showed her something else. A new resonance. A mutation. Possibility. In Joran's blood, altered by radiation and Silthari healing, a new harmony had emerged. One that didn't tear, but wove. If they were to bond, not just in love, but in the ancient Silthari rite of soul weaving, their union could produce something never seen before. A bridge between species, a living key to a new era of unity. Lysara staggered from the chamber, her mind reeling. Hope and terror warred within her. She couldn't tell Joran, not yet. Not until she knew if the oracle's vision was truth or temptation. Meanwhile, Vorlin grew suspicious. He'd intercepted encrypted transmissions from the Azure Dominion, not to Kalen, but to a shadow faction within their military. They weren't just seeking alliance. They were planning to seize the Vareli's wormhole and weaponize it. And they believed Lysara's marriage to Kalen was the key to bypassing Silthari security protocols. Worse, the Synthoid attack hadn't been random. Their programming contained fragments of Azure Dominion code. Someone inside the Dominion, perhaps even Kalen's own advisors, had orchestrated the chaos to force the betrothal. Vorlin confronted Lysara in the moonlit courtyard, his voice low and urgent. "I misjudged you," he admitted, the words clearly costing him. And him, that human. He didn't run when the core threatened to explode. He ran toward it. No Silthari noble would have done that, not without calculating the political fallout first. Lysara studied him. "Are you saying you've changed your mind about us?" "I'm saying," Vorlin replied, "that survival sometimes demands we break the oldest laws. But if you pursue this, if you defy the accord, you must be certain. Because the council will not hesitate to exile you. Or worse." That night, Lysara found Joran on the palace roof, staring at the stars. He'd regained most of his strength, though his left hand still trembled slightly. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "I had a dream," she said softly, "that we were walking through a forest made of light. And every step we took, the ground bloomed with flowers that sang our names." He smiled. "Sounds like my kind of afterlife." "It wasn't an afterlife," she said, turning to him. "It was a beginning." She told him everything, the oracle, the prophecy, the danger, the hope. He listened in silence, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he took her hands in his, both trembling now, but steady together. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We rewrite the rules," she said. But fate had one more twist. 3 nights later, as they prepared to present the oracle's findings to the High Council, Kalen requested a private audience with Joran. Alone. In the hall of shattered mirrors. A place where reflections showed not your face, but your deepest fears. Joran went, wary but unarmed. Kalen stood in the center of the hall, his sapphire robes shimmering. "I know," the prince said simply. "Know what? That you love her, that she loves you, that the oracle has spoken." He turned, his ocean-blue eyes filled with sorrow, not anger. "I was sent here to secure an alliance, but I did not come here to steal a heart that was never mine to claim." Joran frowned. "Then why are you here?" Kalen stepped closer. "Because my people are being manipulated. The faction that sent those synthoids, they plan to assassinate me after the wedding, frame the Silthery, and use the chaos to seize the wormhole. I cannot stop them alone. But together, perhaps we can." Joran stared at him. "You're asking me to help you? So you cannot marry Lysara?" Kalen gave a wry smile. "Call it diplomatic sabotage. Or maybe, just doing what's right." In that moment, Joran saw not a rival, but an ally. A man caught in the same web of duty and desire. The plan formed quickly. They would expose the conspiracy during the betrothal ceremony, using Kalen as bait and Joran as the hidden blade. Lysara would present the oracle's vision as a counterproposal. Not war, not forced marriage, but a new covenant between three worlds. But nothing in the palace ever went as planned. On the day of the ceremony, as the court gathered beneath the open sky in the Garden of Final Vows, the Azure envoys arrived with a gift. A crystalline chalice said to contain the essence of their homeworld's first sunrise. As Kalen raised it in toast, the liquid inside turned black, and the ground beneath the garden erupted. Not synthoids this time, revenants, ancient war constructs, buried beneath the palace for centuries, awakened by the same signal that had triggered the oracle. Their armor was forged from dead stars, their eyes burning with forgotten hatred. They had no allegiance, only destruction. Chaos erupted. Pulse fire lit the air. Courtiers screamed. Vorlin rallied the guards. But the revenants moved like ghosts, their weapons erasing matter from existence. In the midst of it all, Joran grabbed Lysara's hand. "The oracle said our bond could create something new," he shouted over the din. "Maybe it can also stop something old." Understanding flashed in her eyes. Together they ran, not away but toward the central revenant, the one radiating the command signal. At its core pulsed a shard of the same obsidian as the oracle. "The resonance!" Lysara cried. "If we join our energies, human and Silthery, we might disrupt its frequency." They stood back to back in the heart of the battle, Joran's plasma saber humming, Lysara's whisperfong singing. Then, as one, they reached for each other's minds. Not with words, but with raw, unfiltered emotion. Love, fear, hope, fury. A wave of golden light erupted from them, weaving human grit and Silthery grace into a single, blinding chord. The revenants froze. Their cores cracked. One by one, they collapsed into dust. Silence fell over the garden. Kalen stood amidst the wreckage, his chalice shattered at his feet. Vorlin knelt, breathless, his armor scorched. And the High Council, watching from the balcony, saw not a forbidden union, but a miracle. Lysara turned to Joran, her silver hair glowing in the aftermath. "They'll still fight us," she whispered. He grinned, blood on his lip but fire in his eyes. Let them try, because love, they were learning, wasn't just a feeling. It was a weapon, a shield, a new kind of law written not in stone, but in starlight. And their story, far from over, was just beginning to burn brightest. In the quiet aftermath of the revenant collapse, the celestial palace stood suspended between ruin and revelation. Smoke curled from shattered garden trellises, and the air still hummed with the ghost of the golden resonance that had pulsed from Joran and Lysara's joined wills. The courtiers, once so polished and poised, now huddled in clusters, their silken robes stained with ash and disbelief. No one moved to arrest the human. No one dared to speak against the princess. Even the High Council, cloaked in their ceremonial veils of judgment, remained silent on the balcony, watching, weighing, wondering if the universe itself had just rewritten its oldest rules. But silence in a royal court is never peace. It is the breath before the storm. Within hours, the palace was sealed under martial decree. Vorlin, now acting as interim protector of the throne while the sovereign, Lysara's ailing mother, remained in deep meditative stasis, declared a state of emergency. All off-world communications were severed. The Azure envoys were confined to their quarters under armed guard, though Prince Kalen was granted limited freedom due to his cooperation. And Joran? He was placed under what Vorlon dryly called honored observation. A gilded cage of surveillance drones, polite guards, and a suite that overlooked the very garden where he'd nearly died for love. Lasara visited him that night, slipping past the sentries with a grace that spoke of years spent evading royal tutors and protocol masters. She carried no gifts this time, only a data slate etched with encrypted schematics. "They're calling it the harmonic event," she said, sitting beside him on the balcony as the twin moons rose, casting twin reflections in the palace's shattered fountains. "The scholars are in an uproar. Some say you and I triggered a dormant genetic key. Others claim we tapped into the first song, the original frequency that birthed the Silthery from stardust." Joran leaned back, his body still tender but his spirit restless. "And the council?" Her expression darkened. "They're divided. Elder Mareth insists we be exiled, to preserve the purity of the bloodline. But Elder Voss argues that what happened wasn't corruption, it was evolution." He snorted. "Evolution with a side of near-death experience." She smiled faintly, then tapped the data slate. "There's more. The revenants weren't just awakened, they were summoned. Someone planted a resonance beacon deep in the palace foundations, keyed to the oracle's activation frequency. That means whoever did this knew about the oracle, and knew Lasara would seek it." Joran's blood ran cold. "Only a handful of people knew you'd gone to the archives." "Exactly," she said. "And one of them is on the High Council." Before they could speculate further, a soft chime echoed from the corridor. Kalen appeared in the doorway, his sapphire robes replaced by a simple traveler's tunic. He held up his hands in surrender. "I come in peace, and with news." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "My intelligence network just intercepted a transmission from the Azure Military Command. They're mobilizing a fleet, ostensibly to protect the wormhole, but their trajectory suggests they plan to blockade Varelli's within 3 cycles. Lasara's eyes narrowed. "They think the Revenant attack was a Silthery false flag." "Worse," Kalen said grimly. "They believe I'm dead or compromised. My own people are preparing to declare war on yours, and they'll use my tragic demise as justification." Joran stood. "So we're caught between a coup on your side and a theocracy on hers." "Precisely," Kalen replied, "which is why I propose an alliance. Not of marriage, but of truth." Over the next 2 days, the 3 of them wove a fragile coalition in secret. Kalen used his diplomatic clearance to access encrypted Azure channels, feeding false data that suggested he was still in control. Lasara worked with sympathetic archivists to decode the origin of the Revenant beacon, tracing its signal to a hidden chamber beneath the Hall of Echoing Vows, once used by the ancient Silthery warrior priests. And Joran? He trained, not just with weapons, but with the strange new energy that now flickered beneath his skin. A faint golden glow that appeared when he focused his emotions, especially when Lasara was near. "It's not magic," she explained one evening as they practiced in the abandoned East Wing. "It's resonance. Your cells absorb traces of Silthery bioenergy during the healing. Combined with your human adaptability, you're becoming something new." "Great," he muttered, flexing his hand as golden light danced between his fingers. "Just what I always wanted, to be a science experiment with a pulse." She laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a desert storm. "You're not an experiment, Joran Vale. You're a bridge. But bridges can be burned." On the 3rd night, the truth exploded. Elder Mareth, the most vocal opponent of Lasara's union, was found dead in her chambers, her body desiccated as if drained of all life force. At her feet lay a shard of Revenant core and a data crystal containing damning evidence. Mareth had been the one who planted the beacon. She'd hoped the chaos would force Lasara into the Azure marriage, securing what she believed was the only path to survival. But the Revenants had turned on her when her control signal faltered. The revelation split the council. Some called Mareth a traitor, others called her a martyr, and a dangerous faction, led by Elder Voss, once thought to be an ally, began whispering that Lasara herself had orchestrated the whole thing to seize power. "You're being framed," Joran said, pacing their hidden meeting room beneath the library. "They're using Maretha's death to paint you as unstable, unfit to rule." Lasara sat very still, her white hair falling like a veil over her face. "If they declare me unfit, they'll name Vorlon regent, and he'll sign the Azure Treaty within the week." "Not if we stop them first," Kalen said, unfolding a star chart. "My fleet is 12 hours out, but if I can transmit proof of the internal Azure conspiracy, along with evidence that the Revenant attack was Silthery-led, they'll stand down. How? Joran asked. There's a relay satellite in high orbit, Kalen explained. Old Terran design, still functional, but it's guarded by an automated defense grid keyed to Silthari biosignatures. Only a non-Silthari can access it. Joran met his gaze. You want me to go? It's suicide, Lasara whispered. It's the only play, Joran replied. That night, under cover of a meteor shower that lit the sky like falling embers, Joran launched from a hidden hangar in a stolen scout skiff, patched together from battlefield salvage and hope. Lasara watched from the roof, her heart in her throat, as the ship vanished into the lavender clouds. The journey was brutal. Ion storms lashed the hull. The defense grid fired without warning. But Joran, guided by Kalen's voice in his earpiece and Lasara's whispered encouragement through a private comms link, navigated the chaos with the instinct of a man who'd spent his life dancing with death. He reached the satellite, breached the console, uploaded Kalen's evidence, and just as he prepared to transmit, the grid locked onto him. Joran! Lasara's voice crackled through static. Get out! They've triangulated your signal. I'm almost... A blast rocked the skiff. Alarms screamed. Oxygen hissed from a ruptured line. He slammed the transmit button. The data burst into the void. Then the world went white. Back on Varelli's, the transmission arrived like a thunderclap. The Azure fleet halted. Prince Kalen's recorded testimony, backed by military logs and encrypted orders, exposed the coup within his own government. Within hours, loyalist forces seized the conspirators. The blockade was called off. But Joran didn't return. His skiff was listed as lost in the ion storm. Debris was found. No body. Lasara refused to mourn. She stood before the High Council, her eyes blazing with grief and fury, and declared, If he is gone, then let his sacrifice mean something. I will not marry for politics. I will not rule through fear. I will lead as he taught me, to fight for what's right, not what's easy. The council, shaken by the truth and the near war, relented. The betrothal was annulled. Vorlin was named military advisor, not regent, and Lasara was confirmed as heir apparent. Weeks passed. The palace healed. The gardens bloomed anew. But Lasara walked its halls like a ghost, her laughter gone, her songs silent. Then, on the night of the twin eclipses, when the moons aligned and the stars seemed to hold their breath, a signal flickered on the palace's long-range sensors. A single life pod, drifting on solar winds. Inside, battered but alive, lay Joran Vale. His skin pale, his hair streaked with silver, his left hand glowing faintly gold. He'd been found by a scavenger vessel near the edge of known space, half dead but clinging to consciousness by whispering one name over and over. When they brought him to her, Lasara fell to her knees. Not in despair, but in awe. You came back, she breathed. He smiled weakly. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. And as the twin eclipses passed and the stars returned to their watchful posts, the human warrior and the alien princess stood together, not as forbidden lovers, but as architects of a new age.